A 9-foot great white shark vanished off the coast of Australia. Not slowly, not gradually, gone in minutes. The data tag attached to its body washed ashore 4 months later, and what was recorded on it made an entire team of marine scientists stop what they were doing and stare at each other in silence. The depth reading showed the shark had been dragged nearly 2,000 feet straight down in a matter of minutes. The temperature reading showed something even more disturbing. 95 degrees Fahrenheit, sustained, stable, at 2,000 feet below the surface of the Southern Ocean, where the water temperature sits between 40 and 50 degrees. There is only one explanation for a temperature reading like that at that depth. The tag was no longer in the ocean. It was inside something alive, something warm, something that had swallowed a 500-pound apex predator whole and dived 2,000 feet to digest it. And for over a decade, nobody could tell you with certainty what that something was. The candidates were considered and eliminated one by one: orcas, sperm whales, tiger sharks. Every theory collapsed against the data, until scientists finally worked through the physics, the biology, and the tracking records, and arrived at an answer that is in many ways more disturbing than any of the alternatives. Because what ate that great white shark was not a sea monster from the deep. It was something far more unsettling than that. It was something that was right there the whole time, moving through those waters, doing what it has always done, and that we simply had never understood. To appreciate the full weight of what was found on that data recorder, you first have to understand exactly what kind of animal disappeared. Because I think most people have a vague, general sense that great white sharks are dangerous, without fully processing what that actually means in biological terms. A 9-foot great white shark is not a juvenile. It is not a young animal still growing into its adult form. It is a fully mature, fully capable apex predator that has been refined by approximately 11 million years of evolution into one of the most effective killing machines the natural world has ever produced. A 9-foot great white weighs around 500 pounds. It can swim in short bursts at speeds approaching 35 miles per hour. It can detect a single drop of blood diluted through 100 liters of water. It can sense the electromagnetic fields produced by the beating heart of a living animal through solid sand at close range. Its teeth are serrated, constantly replaced as they wear down, arranged in multiple rows so that losing a tooth is never a problem because another one rotates forward to replace it automatically. Great white sharks have survived 5 mass extinction events. They predate the dinosaurs. They have outlasted almost everything else that has ever lived on this planet, not by accident, but because they are extraordinarily, almost perfectly designed for survival. An apex predator at the absolute top of the ocean food chain, with no natural predators of its own. That was the scientific consensus before the data tag washed ashore. That was the settled understanding that the numbers on that recorder quietly, completely demolished. The tag attached to the shark in 2003 was what researchers call a data logger. It records depth, water temperature, light levels, and movement over time, stores that information internally, and then when it eventually detaches and floats to the surface, it transmits everything it recorded to a satellite. The research team that deployed it on a healthy 9-foot female great white off the coast of South Australia was conducting routine long-term tracking work. They expected the usual data profile: normal diving patterns, temperature fluctuations, consistent with the shark moving through different water layers, movement across a known range. What they got when the recorder was recovered and downloaded was a data profile unlike anything anyone on the team had encountered before. The depth reading showed a rapid descent, not gradual, not the smooth, exploratory dive pattern of a shark hunting or investigating its environment. Rapid in the way that only happens when something is being carried down rather than choosing to go. Nearly 2,000 feet in minutes. And then the temperature reading, 95 degrees Fahrenheit. Sustained at 2,000 feet below the surface of the Southern Ocean, where the ambient water temperature at that depth is between 40 and 50 degrees Fahrenheit. The lead researcher on the project later described the moment she processed those two readings together as one of the most unsettling experiences of her scientific career. Not because the data was inexplicable, because of what it required you to conclude. At 2,000 feet in 45-degree water, you cannot record a sustained temperature of 95 degrees unless the measuring instrument is inside the body cavity of a warm-blooded or regionally endothermic living animal. The tag was not in the ocean anymore. It was inside a stomach. And whatever that stomach belonged to had descended to 2,000 feet, carrying a 500-pound great white shark as its meal without apparent difficulty and without leaving a single trace on the surface above. No dorsal fin, no disturbance, no witness of any kind. Just the data on a small plastic recorder that washed up on a beach 4 months later. The process of identifying what was responsible took years and went through every plausible candidate systematically. The first and most obvious suspect was the orca, the killer whale. We know that orcas can kill great white sharks. This is documented on video. Orca populations in specific regions, particularly off the South African coast and in parts of the North Pacific, have developed a highly specialized hunting technique where they ram or grab great whites and flip them upside down, inducing a state of tonic immobility, a kind of paralysis triggered in many shark species when inverted. They then bite into the liver with precision, consuming that specific organ and abandoning the rest of the carcass. It is one of the most sophisticated predation techniques observed in any marine mammal, and it has produced a measurable effect on great white shark populations in regions where orca hunting pressure is high, with sharks abandoning traditional feeding areas entirely after witnessing orca attacks. But the orca theory collapsed immediately against the depth data. Orcas are not deep divers. Their physiology is not built for extreme depth. The deepest recorded orca dive in the scientific literature sits at just under 1,000 feet, and that is an extraordinary outlier, not typical behavior. No orca descends to 2,000 feet. No orca carries a meal to 2,000 feet. The depth reading alone eliminated the most famous shark predator on the planet as a candidate. The second suspect was the sperm whale. Now here is an animal that does dive to extreme depths. Sperm whales are the deep diving champions of the mammalian world, regularly descending to 7,000 feet or more in pursuit of giant squid, the primary item in their diet. A large male sperm whale can reach 60 feet in length and weigh over 100,000 pounds. The throat of a sperm whale is physically large enough to accommodate a 9-foot shark. The depth reading was entirely consistent with sperm whale behavior, but the temperature reading did not fit. Sperm whales are warm-blooded mammals. Their internal body temperature runs approximately 97 to 99 degrees Fahrenheit. The recorded temperature of 95 degrees is measurably lower than the interior temperature of a sperm whale's stomach. Not impossibly lower, but inconsistent enough to give researchers pause. More importantly, sperm whales are not known to hunt sharks. Their diet is overwhelmingly composed of cephalopods, squid predominantly. There is no documented pattern of sperm whales actively pursuing, attacking, or consuming sharks of any species. Behaviorally and thermally, the sperm whale did not fit. Eliminated. Tiger sharks were considered next. Tiger sharks are among the most aggressive and indiscriminate feeders in the ocean. They will eat almost anything, and they are large enough to cause serious damage to other sharks in competitive situations. But the largest confirmed tiger shark on record is approximately 14 feet in length. To consume a 9-foot great white shark whole, you need a predator significantly larger than its prey. A 14-foot tiger shark does not swallow a 9-foot great white. The physics of jaw size, throat diameter, and digestive capacity simply do not work. Oceanic whitetips were considered and eliminated for the same reason. Colossal squid were briefly raised as a fringe theory, the idea being that a squid of sufficient size could potentially drag a shark to depth. That theory lasted approximately as long as it took someone to look at the temperature reading. A cold-blooded invertebrate cannot produce and maintain a sustained internal temperature of 95 degrees Fahrenheit. Eliminated. The entire conventional list of candidates had been exhausted, and the data was still sitting there, pointing at something that none of the standard explanations could account for. Which is when researchers turned to the one possibility that had been sitting in front of them the entire time, but that nobody had wanted to say out loud. What if the predator was another great white shark? Not a slightly larger specimen that won a territorial dispute. A great white shark of a size that most marine biologists had never seriously factored into their models of ocean ecology. A shark so large that a 9-foot, 500-pound apex predator was not a rival, but a meal. Here is the scientific reasoning that made this conclusion not just plausible, but the most supported explanation available. The temperature reading of 95 degrees Fahrenheit is the key piece of evidence that points specifically to a great white shark rather than any other candidate. Most people know that sharks are cold-blooded, meaning their body temperature matches the surrounding water. What most people do not know is that great white sharks are a significant exception to that rule. Great whites belong to a family called the Lamnidae, the mackerel sharks. They possess a biological adaptation called regional endothermy. They are capable of generating and retaining heat in specific regions of their body, particularly around their muscles, eyes, and brain, through a heat exchange system involving blood vessels called the rete mirabile. This allows a great white shark to maintain temperatures in its core body significantly above the surrounding water temperature. In cold, deep water, the interior of a large great white shark's stomach could plausibly sustain a temperature in the range of 90 to 96 degrees Fahrenheit. The 95-degree reading is not a match for a mammal. It is not a match for any other candidate. It is a match for the internal body temperature of a large great white shark. The depth data also fits great white behavior in ways that researchers initially discounted. Great whites are capable of far deeper dives than their typical coastal operating range suggests. They have been tracked descending to over 3,000 feet in open ocean environments. A rapid descent to 2,000 feet, while extreme, is within the documented physiological capability of the species. and for one great white to successfully prey upon another. Researchers who study shark predation dynamics estimate that the predator would need to be approximately twice the length of the prey animal. To consume a 9-foot shark, you're looking at a predator somewhere between 15 and 20 feet in length, possibly larger. A great white shark of that size is at the outer boundary of what the species is known to achieve, but it is not beyond it. The largest reliably confirmed great white sharks approach 20 feet in length. The largest female great whites on scientific record weigh in excess of 4,000 pounds. And here is where the data from the 2003 incident connected to something researchers found when they looked at tracking records from other animals in the same region in the months that followed. A separate tracking system recorded the movement of a large, untagged animal moving through the same waters where the tagged shark had disappeared. The movement patterns, the dive profiles, the territorial range of this untagged animal were all consistent with an enormous female great white shark, a shark that had never been formally documented by science before, a shark the ocean had simply never introduced to researchers working in that region. She had been there the whole time, moving through those waters quietly, doing exactly what apex predators do. And one day in 2003, she encountered a 9-foot great white shark and treated it the way the top of any food chain treats what is below it. Once the predation hypothesis was confirmed and the most likely culprit identified, scientists did what scientists always do when they find something unexpected. They went back through the historical record looking for patterns they had previously explained away or filed under less dramatic categories, and what they found demonstrated that this was not a freak occurrence. It was a pattern with a paper trail decades long. Mid-20th century fishing and research records contain multiple accounts of great white sharks hauled up or observed bearing massive bite wounds. Wounds with the specific arc, the specific spacing, and the specific serration pattern that could only come from the jaws of another great white. For decades, these records were categorized as evidence of territorial aggression or competition over food resources. Nobody seriously entertained the possibility that what was actually being documented was systematic predation. Then, in 1997, a research vessel working near the Farallon Islands off San Francisco watched a large great white get physically attacked and displaced from a whale carcass by a visibly larger great white, not competing over the carcass, attacking the smaller shark with clear predatory intent and driving it away in a state of visible distress. In 2009, a formal study published across multiple marine biology journals documented evidence of intraspecies predation among great white sharks at multiple locations across the Pacific. In 2022, researchers working off the South African coast discovered a group of great white sharks carrying matching parallel bite wounds, same depth, same spacing, same origin, that could only have been inflicted by members of their own species. Taken individually, each of these incidents could be explained as an aggressive territorial encounter between competing predators. Taken together across 70 years of observation and multiple ocean basins, they describe something else entirely. The very largest great white sharks actively prey upon smaller great white sharks. The food chain that the entire scientific and popular understanding of ocean ecology placed as ending at the great white shark does not end there. It continues upward into size ranges that marine science has barely begun to seriously investigate. The reasons this behavior stayed hidden for so long are as significant as the behavior itself, because they tell you something important about the genuine limits of what marine science currently understands about the ocean. The open ocean is incomprehensibly vast. The Pacific Ocean alone covers 60 million square miles. The total combined area of all the world's oceans is approximately 139 million square miles. Of that, perhaps 5% has been meaningfully explored by human instruments. The deep pelagic zone, the open ocean below 1,000 feet, is for most practical purposes completely invisible to science. Whatever happens in that environment, we do not see it. We cannot see it with current technology deployed at current levels of coverage. The second factor is the fundamental limitation of tagging research itself. For all the shark research conducted over the past half-century, the total number of great white sharks that have ever successfully carried a functioning data tag is a small fraction of the estimated global population of 3,000 to 5,000 individuals. We are drawing sweeping conclusions about the behavior and ecology of an entire species based on observations of a tiny unrepresentative sample. The third factor is what researchers call size bias in field observation. When scientists tag great white sharks, they do so primarily in coastal areas where sharks come close to shore. The animals available for tagging in these shallow water coastal environments tend to be younger and smaller. The very largest great white sharks, the 20-foot females that carry the most ecological significance and that may be responsible for the interspecies predation we are now documenting, spend the majority of their time in the deep open ocean far from coastlines and far from research vessels. We have been studying the species by observing the portion of the population that is easiest to find while the most ecologically significant members move through an environment we cannot reach. It is equivalent to trying to understand the complete behavioral ecology of African elephants by exclusively studying the calves that wander to the edge of the reserve. The conservation implications of what the 2003 incident revealed extend well beyond the scientific interest of the discovery itself. Great white sharks are a protected species in many parts of the world, and conservation strategies for the species are built on population models that treat human activity, specifically commercial fishing, finning, and habitat degradation, as the primary threats to great white survival. Those models do not account for interspecies predation as a meaningful mortality factor in population dynamics. If very large great whites regularly prey upon smaller great whites, removing them from the population before they reach reproductive maturity, then the survival rate assumptions built into existing conservation models are wrong. The population recovery projections built on those assumptions could be significantly off. The broader ecological implications involve what biologists call trophic cascades, the ripple effects that move through an entire ecosystem when something changes at the very top of the food chain. We already know that great white shark populations have dramatic effects on the behavior and distribution of their prey species, seals, sea lions, smaller sharks, and various fish populations. The presence of great whites in a given area reshapes the movement and behavior of everything below them. If interspecies predation is actively reshaping the size distribution of the great white population itself by selectively removing smaller individuals before they reach full adult size, the cascade effects through every level of the food web below could be significant and entirely unaccounted for in any existing ecological model. We have built our entire understanding of ocean ecosystem dynamics on a food chain diagram with the great white shark at the top. That diagram is incomplete. And if we got that wrong about the most studied, most filmed, most famous predator in the ocean, the question that follows is one that should occupy every marine biologist working today. What else are we wrong about? The animal researchers believe was responsible for the 2003 incident became known informally among the research community as the deep blue candidate, a reference to deep blue, the largest great white shark ever reliably photographed, a female estimated at approximately 20 feet in length, filmed off the coast of Mexico in 2013, and subsequently documented at various Pacific locations over the following decade. Whether the shark responsible for the 2003 predation event and the animal later photographed and known as Deep Blue are the same individual is something nobody can confirm with certainty. The ocean does not present its residents for easy identification, and a shark that spends most of its time in deep, open water is not easily tracked. But the ambiguity itself is the most important part of the story. Because we have given a name to the largest great white we have ever managed to photograph, and we have built around her a narrative of individual recognition that makes her feel known and understood. She is not known and understood. She is one data point in a population of animals that moves through an environment we have barely entered, living lives we have barely glimpsed, doing things we would not have believed possible until a small plastic data recorder washed up on an Australian beach and forced us to reckon with what it had recorded. The ocean contains animals we have never seen and behaviors we have never documented and ecological relationships we have never mapped. The 9-foot great white shark that vanished in 2003 was the apex predator in every model, every chart, every textbook. And something looked at it and saw lunch. The food chain does not end where we drew the line. Whatever is below those lines in the deep and the dark is not waiting to be discovered. It has been there the whole time, doing what it has always done, long before we were watching. And it will continue doing it long after we stop.